Good afternoon. Welcome to the August 15th meeting of the Pownell Planning Commission. We're going to start off with a board member roll call. I'm going to start from the remote site.
Michelle Peckrell.
Stacy Boxer,
Megan Randall.
Brian Harris,
Fred Miller.
John Bashy.
Jim Winchester.
Roy Lauritsen.
Well, approval of the agenda. Our agenda is as follow. Following the board member roll call. Approval of agenda, approval of minutes for July 18th meeting. Municipal planning grant project update. The pledge of allegiance discussed continues. Public comment and adjourn.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Brian, aye.
Fred, aye.
Jim, aye.
John, aye.
Okay, so we're looking at the approval of the minutes for July 18th.
I move that we accept the minutes as presented.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Abstain.
Aye.
Aye.
Brian, aye.
Fred, aye.
John, aye.
Am I?
Right. Actually, Roy would be a abstain from that.
Oh, because I.
Yeah, you weren't here on that one.
So that brings us to our municipal planning grant project update with DCRC.
Lines and issues, please let us know. We can, should I sit someplace where I can be seen?
Yeah, if you want.
Up here, come up here.
Come stand up here, you can pull the chair up to the table, your choice.
You can move down.
Another chair on the inside if need be.
Since we last had the chance to meet, we sort of had a much larger sort of list of sites, a lot of good feedback from the planning commission at that meeting and some good direction about next steps. I want to give you a bit of an update on what we've done since then, and then perhaps take some time to go over what's in front of you. First and foremost, we were able to get in touch with Darcy Pruden, get some good detailed maps about the wastewater districts as they've been permitted through Act 50 and sort of where their boundaries are, as well as where sites that we had sort of suggested fit within that district and what sort of connections may be available to those facilities, to those sites, should they exist or should they be contemplated. Secondly, we had an afternoon with Joel Burrington, or morning Joel Burrington, we sort of were able to get around town and get a little bit more detail on some of these sites, some of their backgrounds, and how some of the pieces fit together all throughout the town, from as far down as the Hart Gravel Bank and the racetrack, up to North Pownell and over towards Pettit Drive, et cetera, coming out of the gravel pit operation. So we had refined some of the criteria that we had put forth at our previous meeting and decided to dig into these specific criteria. You may notice that there are 3 sheets here of industrial, commercial, and residential siting potential, and not a 4th pertaining to mixed use. This was sort of a decision that Scott and I came to as we were going through our list and seeing, well, all the places that we ended up talking about residential or commercial where mixed use seemed to be a possibility, it got to the point that it was more of a redundancy.
Yeah.
And so I repeated redundancy there to underscore make the points as clearly as I could. And so we thought that we might get a little bit more of a view at the distinctions between these particular three. But as you'll see on the second page of each of these pairs of pages, we did include how the sites sort of sugared out with respect to these elements. So there's another sort of important element to consider is that you're thinking through momentum as we put these together. That's thinking through having similar, like uses by one another, clustering, and thinking through where development may occur and how that might get a bit of a buzz around the town where certain developments are encouraged, so that there's something to the notion of that nothing will succeed like success. And so a number of these sites that you see before you have, or a few of them have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 lots that are sort of all together, and we can speak about them in more detail. They are laid out individually on the second page, but visually, just for the sake of simplicity, they are sort of at that zoomed out sort of grouped scale. There were, as you all might expect, certain nodes that emerged as places where activities make sense. It makes sense to see commercial activity at the intersection of 346 and 7. It makes sense to see some mixture of uses around 346 and North Powell Road. And it makes sense to see a whole host of some of the uses of residential and commercial in Powell Center. And we'll talk more as we get into the residential about sort of one of the more, you might say, single family large lots, residential developments, potential spots that we saw around town. Let's see, and so tonight we're hoping we can do just sort of layouts. What we'd like to do at your time is to discuss some of the sites here, any questions you may have about the process by which we arrived at some of these sites, and then to turn our eye towards the next important step and milestone in this project, which is filing the sort of the up-to-date report, mid-project report with the commission, with the select board, that details how we arrived at this point and where we would like to go and what got us to this point. As you establish anything that I should have included preamble.
No, just to say that, that these maps aren't highly detailed, and that there are, actual lot numbers associated with each one of these, and the sort of addresses and lot numbers are similar. Some of them don't have. Some of them we'll discuss it all when we get to individual ones, but we in the next phase of the reporting and everything we do, we'll make sure that we have much more detailed maps that are showing exactly which parcels we're talking about in a way where right now we're kind of talking more about the general areas that this activity might take place.
I have a really ignorant question, but I'm not really a great map reader, and I don't understand why the same locations have different numbers. Is that something you could just?
Sure. So each map is just going to be looked at individually. So these are, what we've done is we've chosen 5 areas where there are either, one large scale site that we feel would be accommodating towards industrial development, commercial development, or residential development. And we sort of just put those areas on the map. Every single map just has its own 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Starting from, northeast to southwest. And there are occasional times where, for example, what we're calling a Route 7 cluster, while those are the same lots, across a couple of both industrial and commercial potential, they are different numbers on actually in this case, they're the same numbers, but they may represent different numbers on each individual map. So I think for the ease of our conversation today, we're going to ask you all to just look at one map at a time, put the other 2 aside, and then we'll think about the numbers there.
We'll worry about that.
And then we'll start with industrial, then we'll go to commercial, then we'll go to residential, or however Jonathan wants to lead it that way. One at a time.
Starting with industrial,
That's
Okay, great.
So one of the things that sort of underlies any industrial siting potential is the notion of risk and investment. It's been on, it's true throughout Vermont. There's not a lot of available industrial sites in just about any town around the state. So as you see in each of the following maps that go through them, there's a column on that second page that has to do with public investment level. These are very speculative. They're not requirements, but they are meant to give a sense of where municipalities can make efforts of one kind or another, generally financial, to improve sites, to encourage certain elements of development, or to decide to pursue external offset the costs of those developments. That's more relevant in industrial siting, as you might expect, than it is with a lot of residential siting. So to begin with, we'll start with our Route 7 cluster. And these 3 lots have to do with you'll recall, are where the Dion Snowshoes at this time, the farm and feed store, what is that place called? Strohmeyer's only, it's on the. Yes, Peaceful Valley, thank you. And a sort of metals and commodities trading lot in between. We didn't see a lot of, as you might imagine, residential promise on those sites, as they're right along Route 7, but they seem to stand out to us as having a good bit of promise for some light industry. Indeed, that's what is being.
They're right across from the Apollo racetrack, aren't they?
They're a little farther north, just beside the Dollar General, you might say, in that Pettit Drive area. A little north of actually where we are right now, but probably 2 or 3 minutes by car north.
Excuse me, so when you say industrial, you're talking a light industrial, right? Because I don't think this town could handle the infrastructure for some heavy factory. Correct?
So there are different levels of industrial that we could look at, and some of them depend on sort of what investment level that the town might be interested in doing, but max scale, what we're envisioning is something similar to what's in the Dorset area. They have a nice industrial park. That's the sort of largest scale we can sort of feasibly imagine would be attractive to bring in certain, regional oriented businesses into this area. But they have a nice area there. They have they have a windmill production facility. It's not a very large footprint. They have a large printing shop there and things like that as well. So we feel like that's the sort of level of scale that Pownell could accommodate with the low to a moderate level of public investment.
Especially on Route 7,
Yeah, meeting the industry where it currently is an important part of, having the scale, the shift, to go from 2 to 8 positions or something along those lines. It's a big jump, and it's much more difficult to go from 2 to 50 or something like that. So we are keeping it in mind that, where we are now with Dion, is a fairly small business, but one that is active and is producing goods of a high resale value. And that's a valuable thing for the town's tax base and for the sort of opportunity for consumers to have a product from Pownell. And so we saw some light manufacturing there, as mentioned, with some additional potential space in the back for the growth of perhaps that facility, or perhaps for another facility of a similar power draw and infrastructural need. And we see that as sort of being the case for all 3 of those parcels. Looking through the flood maps, looking through the wetland maps, there's enough space that smaller building footprints, such as the size of the buildings that are there now, make sense that they could also fit back there without there being an additional undue burden on the road traffic or on the wastewater infrastructure that's currently there. And so in each of those instances, the public investment level is relatively low. It meets it's a continuation of what's currently there. By contrast, the next element, we're talking about the Mac molding site, is probably an area where we're talking about perhaps a higher level of a public investment. And in this instance, this is something that we've been talking about a good bit between us. Federal grants that underwrite the cost of public improvements to water, wastewater, or any sort of infrastructure that results in economic development and job growth. The notion of the Northern Borders Regional Commission as one federal entity that funds these elements was to assist towns or assist rural areas across northern New England and upstate New York with the, might say, infrastructure investment gap. That if we had an airstrip here, we would see more development, more activity. How do we get from point A to point B? I think this particular site is not part of the wastewater system, and that may be something that could help the facility be of an improved value to its owners. And knowing that making the best use out of the structure that you have is by and large much easier than building new structures. That's something that we thought made sense for us to highlight here.
So as an organization with, an existing business model that's successful, they're really only using the space right now as warehousing because that's what it's set up for. There's been some initial discussion about the potential of them being able to, turn that into an actual more of an employment hub than it is right now, acting only as warehousing space if they were able to access wastewater effectively, which is a lift, but it is something that does run adjacent to the area and might be something that could be done again with the right level of carrots and sticks. It also might encourage MAC when they continue to expand as they're a growing company, to look at other places in the town, potentially at these other sites that we've identified as other potential locations to locate.
That's not on the wastewater management map?
It is
Or it can't,
connected.
can it not, but it can be connected?
It is
Well, you
close
said
enough.
it's a lift, how big, do you have a sense of how much money that would
Not
cost?
at this time. And our hope was to sort of think through where might a conversation begin and sort of where's, okay, this is worth spending more time on. One of the elements that's part of our final product is what are the resources available to achieve some of these goals, and simply getting a feel for
Yeah.
what's within the realm of possibility, and where can the planning commission, the town at large, sort of be directing its dialogue around economic development in the region or in the town, and in how to effectuate some outcomes that are in line with the town plan, which is, I think, broadly supportive of bringing more jobs to the town.
So it's definitely not on the floodplain at all, Mac.
So
There's a small retention pond on the property, that is sort of listed as, wetlands from the state, but it's not, it's actually, that has been already engineered into the site the way it's been designed to deal with the flooding, to deal with potential
Okay,
flooding.
so, okay.
Yeah.
They're considering that a wetland though? That pond?
No, we've looked at the wetland maps related to all these sites, and they were factored heavily into how we decided to move forward. Yeah.
There's only 10 acres there, right, and so making expansion around that, if somebody wanted to, would be difficult.
Right, and actually that kind of brings up a Lincoln Street field, which is sort of nearby. It's a few lots to the south. That's not designated as extremely prime, as extremely prime agricultural land, and in the same sort of hook up to the wastewater infrastructure. That would also be a site that you would want to probably invest in to just make sure that area itself had additional growth capacity.
So in that instance, what you might see as a medium level of investment would, in that case, probably have a great deal to do with road improvements, as the preferred access to that site were to be a location of a number of jobs and truck deliveries in and out would be over Lincoln's, crossing or meet up with 346, as opposed to going through Main Street and through past all those neighbors and residences driving towards the north. To be clear, we're not making a recommendation that all these things take place. We're simply trying to find locations where there might be some good conversations to be had, and sort of running through some of these sites that, with our application of criteria for water concerns, for slope concerns, soil concerns, and then proximity to infrastructure, we're sort of recommending themselves.
It's an expensive site though, isn't it? It's valued at 700,000.
I'm sorry?
The value of MAC is 700,000. I know that's not market value, but I'm
I
just saying.
see. Oh, okay. I am not certain. That's the appraised
Yes,
value?
appraised value.
Yeah, so in those places where that value is already fairly high, perhaps there is some sort of, into a lot of economic development lenses. It seems like, well, let's work on
leveraging the value we already have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what, for the guys who have, Jimmy and, what's been the history on this? Have we talked about sewer hookup with, has anyone broached that with Mac?
No,
Okay,
no, they use it every day.
It wasn't off.
Storage. They bring down the truck, whatever they got.
but nobody on the select board has ever, there's no history there.
There has been conversation a number of years ago, but nothing.
Nothing came of it, yeah.
Was there no interest in offering a hookup for them when they were hooking everybody up?
I think right now it's a high-speed corridor, or, you know, as far as the way that the waste is flowing there. So there would have to be some accommodation. So it's not as easy as like hooking up a new residential unit or something like that to the area. There is some specifics related to the
Mechanical.
just the flow rate in that area and things like that that would need to be accompanied for, according to the way our conversation with Darcy.
But there is additional capacity in the town's wastewater system?
Yeah, our understanding is that none of the individual items we're discussing endangers the thresholds for the wastewater system. But each individual use needs to sort of be understood for, okay, what will it lead to? What will it be more of in the system, and what are the appropriate thresholds for that, whether we're talking about dog hair from a pet grooming facility or something, different from that. But those are the, so really we're sort of looking here at, okay, with respect to MAC, when those conversations were taking place, perhaps they had a different perspective on where their future expansion would be. There's not a lot of room in any one of their facilities around Vermont, and they do have the opportunity to grow, and they are hoping to find places to do that, and what's the best way to take advantage of our locations. And so the thought here is that the dialogue that would come about would be more fruitful than the dialogue that never comes about. And if there are ideas to share, I think that we're lucky to be in a place where at least it's not shocking to get a phone call from one of the towns where you have some real estate and to be invited to have a conversation. So that's certainly within the realm of possibility.
And there are other possibilities when it comes to, like you said, if there's specific needs that an individual business that is seeking to locate in the area wants. I'm thinking of an example from Montpelier, where they had a distillery come into town and they created a specific tax increment financing district around those lots where the distillery was going to locate specifically so they could have sewage handled, through that financing mechanism at the time of construction, and then have it paid for through an additional supplement on their property taxes moving forward to help pay off that bond. So there are tools that exist, and it feels to us that Mac has, as a pre-existing tenant in this building, or owner of the building rather, might be willing to invest in something similar.
Would you be looking at investment, the town would get some sort of grant, is what you're saying, some federal?
That's one probably broadly preferable avenue, is that, that the federal government recognizes that is a good use of federal funding, that it's meant to create economic activity in the areas, in the municipalities or the counties that are in far-flung locations up in Maine or, over in the Adirondacks, state park, that could really benefit if there was a pipe that went from here to there.
Yeah.
And that is one of the most common uses of that funding that would probably be a very relevant element in any sort of conversation that was it's not the only approach, it's just one that came to mind, is that when we're discussing these things, we're attempting to keep them in the realm of feasibility. And that this is, and you might look at me with an arched eyebrow when I get to the Lovett Cemetery extension idea, but that was, the notion was that some municipalities will think, let's go big and be creative. And so we tried to put a suite of ideas here that still have some grounding in reality, and it's in feasibility.
Basically, what I'm hearing, basically in a nutshell, it's These are your 5 locations that are very suitable for this industrial and minus a few upgrades that they potentially would need.
But, and some more upgrades than others, so.
Yeah, okay, can we continue on?
Sure.
With the rest of them, the racetrack?
So
Lincoln Street Field, what does
What's that?
that look like? Is that where that blue building is?
No, just
Free
past Mac, take the dirt road that goes across the tracks.
Oh,
No,
the field.
Field on the backside.
Okay, gotcha, okay. So that's there.
Yeah, the field is there. There's
Do
a
they-
road there.
Someone else owns it, though?
I'm not sure who the owner is.
Cornfield right now. Not sure who's.
But it's privately owned, it's not,
Yeah, it's private.
got it.
It's about 18 and a half acres. Some of it is well outside of any flooding area. Some of it would be, well, flooding, but some of it is well outside of the floodplain. Some of it is where you would have mitigation against inundation. And it's just an example of like, here's a parcel that is relatively, there's right nearby other industrial uses. It would.
Right off Route
It's
346.
right off 346.
Okay, got it.
So it might be something that, if we're talking about where there isn't already a building, then this might be an area that's very flat, well drained, it sort of makes some sense.
Maybe if the town did some road upgraded the septic through there, it would make it a more appealing site where it would open up the possibility of a business wanting to relocate there.
Or Mac wanting to buy it.
Yeah,
Or anybody.
a number of things, yeah. It's,
It would open up the possibility. That's the whole.
Yeah, that's, no,
Trying to create possibilities.
I'm just wondering where the money comes from.
Well, that's what was briefly discussed, like, this is
Yeah.
just an
Federal
idea
grants,
that we
it's
can present to the select board. We can discuss it, see if we want to
Yeah.
dedicate more resources to pursuing it, and maybe finding grants or deciding, well, hey, maybe we can ask Joel to put it into the road budget in the next couple of years to upgrade Lincoln Street in a paving project. Something like that.
yeah. And
Lincoln Street,
and while it's hard to describe any elements of the racetrack as low-hanging fruit,
that's who owns it.
that triangle that is on the eastern side of the railroad track does somewhat stand out. There's a ball field there on one side now.
Yep.
That one sort of stood out to us as being probably the least complicated by in terms of access. And so wherever this conversation may go, the thought is, okay, that's also, privately owned. Is there a role that the town plays in providing some, in working in partnership with the owner to focus on this area, what's marketable here? And rather than the notion that this very large entity may have there's one person out there who has the exact right idea and we just have to find that right person, or is the case that we hit some singles and then, we're moving through the order. And so that was really why we had that variable public investment level is really, it's all too early to say what that might be. And it has to do with what these conversations are like and the resumption of conversations that have taken place in the past.
But insofar as the racetrack itself, this is a nice, and this is what was it, 12 acres-ish? What was this, or 8?
The triangle?
The triangle.
Yeah, it's 9 acres.
A 9-acre site. Really easy to access 9 acres of that racetrack parcel. The rest of it, on the other side of the railroad tracks, there's issues with
That has all its own
yeah,
issues.
all of its own issues. It's flooding, it's got all the other things happening over there, so.
Floodplain, railroad access.
Yeah, so, but this area seems just really primed to have something of value for the town there. And it's, it's just really.
That 9 acres includes the ball field.
That includes the current ball field portion.
So there's,
They tried to move out to trailer park years ago, but Mr. Teason, who owned it then, nixed it, and then these people bought it. It's all history now. We can't find it. See,
the last site that we had suggested was an example of where some perhaps more ambitious approach. The address for this fifth location is actually on Poor Man's Road, Northwest Hill, Crum. But the section that is just south of the river is very well drained, it is very flat, and it is very appropriate for, would be a good place, a good visible place for some economic activity. Can you find it? We probably have to imagine an extension from Lovett Cemetery Road that went over the Hoosick River. So simple, but the idea being that you can see that's a high, very, investment level. But the idea is that while it's not the strongest of the sites, it is the case that, that when we're looking for what are the barriers to industrial development, we're trying to think creatively about where the barriers can be overcome from a engineering standpoint, rather than spending time on things that have no potential. But so I put that up.
A lot of, as you guys know, Pownell's very hilly, a lot of slope in this town. So, when you're looking for industry, you need to just look at what are your biggest, flattest sites that you may be able to have some access to. And that's sort of the sense that we came up to this road.
That land is owned by a realty company in Connecticut, I understand.
Who's it owned by what?
A realty company.
Realty company in Connecticut. According to the town map, it is. I don't know if that's accurate.
Greenwich, Connecticut, yeah.
Yeah, Greenwich.
They're
Do
asking,
they pay taxes on that land?
Yes, they do.
And if we were to carve out 9 acres,
Well,
we might get a break. Just thinking.
you got solar panels in there, 9 acres of solar panels that pay
You
the
do,
taxes.
I didn't know that.
oh, you're talking about this,
Oh, we're talking about the track?
we're talking about the Lovett Cemetery extension.
So it's sort of going.
Jumped right along.
Then just leaping over the river and,
Yeah, I got you.
Over there?
There it is.
yeah, so we were looking actually on the south side of the Hoosick River there. So there's a lot of,
Across the river from like the liquor store, I think is where they're talking.
Yeah, behind there.
there's a lot of work that took place. The thought was that there's an extension of a public road. And as such, give it some due consideration. As Scott had pointed out, the opportunities to find
Flat.
non-prime agricultural soil that's, that might have another use. Really this was where we had our greatest constraints with this type of use. So we wanted to stick with ones that we know and then try to think a little creatively about some potential sites that might be worth just.
Is that on the sewer system, do you know?
I do not know. I doubt that they're outside of that sewer district. So they would not have a sewer. So there's another challenge.
There's nothing there,
Yeah,
yeah.
there's nothing on that side of the river through there.
Nothing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, that was just
what would the access be?
Similar to accessing the racetrack.
Oh.
But when that road would need to have a spur that went over.
It has a lot of the same problems as the racetrack, but it also, if there's any kind of potential development for the racetrack, this would also be considered as another potential expansion of that
So
site.
you need to build a bridge, you're saying? Oh, that,
Well, that's one option.
That's one option. We're,
I like it. It's
There is some road access out
creative,
through there,
guys.
but it's
You know
all,
what that would cost?
northwest.
And very uphill,
It's only money.
to get back down across to.
It actually connects to the town center, doesn't it? I mean, it's pretty adjacent to town center.
It's fair. I mean, once you're, if crossing the river were no great object, yeah, you come out right by.
I'm saying that you could go from Center Street right to the racetrack if you had a road there, couldn't you? Am I wrong?
I'm not certain.
I'm the new guy here, so I don't know these things.
this is Center Street. Racetrack is way down that way.
There was a street, he's talking, it's Main
I
Street,
think of a different street.
the library is,
Maybe it's Main Street, I'm thinking.
But you got the river, you got the very
there's one bridge.
tight spot, the tractor trail. to get across
Think
the
about where
river.
the post office is.
That is the biggest, wish site as far as the.
I don't know how a truck could get around that corner
But-
on the bridge,
It's a little rough.
but I like it, it's interesting. It's an interesting, I never thought
I
of it.
never would have even considered looking at that over there.
Yeah.
I know there was talk about hiking access and trail access for Massachusetts going in through there.
That's what we're talking about, yes.
Yeah.
So what would you consider for industry there?
Specific kind of industry we're not certain about, but the idea being that just when if a site selector is looking at, there's all the stuff that they would like to see, they'd like to see airports and interstates and on-ramps. And then they say, well, what do they see here? And the thought was, here's some undeveloped land that is developable, that is some infrastructural connectivity short of being a viable, green field to develop on. And, I think from a lot of, I think most perspectives would say, well, let's go take another look at the Route 7 cluster first. Or like, let's take another crack at the Lincoln Street field. It's sort of a contrast to where where the barriers are not as high, then maybe we focus our attention on them a little bit more.
Williams College did a report on that area. Are you familiar?
Yeah, they have. They've done a lot of some of that land. Yeah, the land that they've owned in that area is pretty extensive. And so, I mean, there could be a lot of value to some certain operations that might make sense for that location, but we weren't certain what they were, but we saw that chunk of land and thought.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, actually.
Yeah.
And
Okay. Never mind.
Michelle, is there anything that you wanted to add that we've been focused in the room? Just wanted to give you a little update.
I'm just listening to everyone.
Commercial? What do you want?
Yeah, and so if we sort of during that, so having reviewed that industrial stuff, we can
Interesting.
pivot to our commercial sort of top five. Now, there's a lot of here's what the difference is in what is commercial activity. Like what are we talking? We talk about commerce. We know that there's all manner of ways of making your way in the world. And so we wanted to have a sort of top five that reflected some of that variation. We begin again with the Route 7 cluster up at the top of the page. It's those same three parcels because they have a lot of visibility. They are a place where you can slow down and stop pretty easily. There's not a blind corner you're coming around. There's a lot of people coming into that area every day. And so it makes sense to consider, are those three lots that together make up about, I think it's close to 20 acres. There's, when you put the three of them together, not every square inch of it is fit for development, but there's room and they're not fully built out. And that's so that we want to sort of.
They're long lots with wetlands, to the eastern side, and then the road side, is good buildable land for the most of it. The idea of clustering these lots together is if, you're attracting development in that area, hopefully you'll be able to reduce the amount of access points onto Route 7. There are already some right there right now, of course, but again, if it's industry or commercial, you want to make sure that your trucking was obviously safe to make the turns at those areas while not significantly reducing the speeds on 7.
And so this is, any sort of number of, so these would be targeting towards customers that are making the drive down, people that live nearby, people that live one or two towns over, trying to capitalize on proximity to both the Bennington market as well as the Williamstown market. And so there's, whether these are goods or office, services, there's a lot of potential in those three lots for some building. There's a typo on this page where number 2 is the Dean Road General Store, and you turn the page and it's number 3. So 2 and 3 are flipped on the second sheet, but hope you'll bear with us.
Okay.
As we will take on.
They're labeled though,
They're
so
labeled.
we'll figure it
We'll take
out.
on the Pownell Center infill first, and this is where we're really getting our first look at this 5-lot area, but I think many of you know well that we're rather close to right now. That sort of begins with the good old days, former Jaeger restaurants, and to the north side, and is sort of here on Center Street. I think it's probably 510, right across the street is the southernmost of those in the infill area. And as you can see, there's some interesting possibilities looking in the rear lot areas for a few of these. Rather remarkable at 460 Center Street, which has some road frontage out onto North Pownell Road, where I think this building used to be.
Oh, the corner.
Oh,
Old school,
So you can still see the curb, is cut there. That's a sort of an intriguing location, both for residential, as we'll see, and for commercial, as you sort of are heading down North Pownell Road. If you look to your left, you can see a long sort of way through there. There's a bit of, not some alley, but there's space that's.
Space for something like a service alley that could serve multiple lots, going through the old, right of way that they.
Who owns that?
There are multiple parcels by, 3 or 4 owners.
You're talking the back,
the old school lot?
it actually would have been the old road through before 7 came up through.
Is Lampman the name?
Lampman?
Yeah,
what's the address? 460 Center Street?
460 Center Street, which is kind of almost like an L shape. It's got this portion on center and then it knocks out, it's probably 1.75 acres. It goes up to North Pownell Road, which presents just an interesting opportunity, certainly. It's taking a
Yeah,
step.
Francis Lampman,
Okay.
deceased.
So it's up for grabs. So taking a step back, what we have here is something I think resonates both from a sort of commercial and residential perspective. There's the Valley of Peace. Like, this is such a special spot. This showed up in a UN magazine in one of the most optimistic time periods in world history. That there's
Is that an app you know?
a town office, that there's a cemetery, there's places to sit, there's things for the kids to do.
Recreational park coming in now.
Pollinator garden?
It's really, there's a lot to this, and you get respite and separation from Route 7. And as we looked at this, we could see on both sides of Center Streets, this area, there's probably a lot of opportunities for people to want to spend time here, either those that live here or those that do not live here and are passing through here or would like to visit here. And so that sort of small scale business, shopkeep, proprietor activity is what we sort of had in mind when we thought about what the infill here would look like, or could look like.
It's a cafe, this town.
And that there's, some opportunities to, perhaps here, if there was, anyone's imagination can sort of fill it in, but these are well cared for homes. They look lovely, they photograph well, and it's the kind of thing that we thought we wanted to just make a statement about, and then mention there is some, interesting adjacent parcels that share a lot of those characteristics. But you can see that as well as anybody else out these windows. And some opportunities for investment, we think.
Is it for sale?
So jumping outside of the center of town, the Dean Road General Store is a place that really caught our attention for a number of reasons. I think, a lot of folks will remember buying belts there, and that general store, and it's sort of in a situation where it's adjacent or across, just right next to the town garage.
Right.
So there's, a public facility there, and it's a matter of, I think it also has a parcel on the other side of 346 that is contained with it, bringing its total size up to about 1.5 acres. So this one is sort of an interesting spot where, it had met a local demand in the past. There's a lot of, I think, potential in North Pownell's growth for a number of reasons. And we sort of wanted to make sure that we highlight that as possibly a valuable commercial property in one way or the other. And so was there elements of the town garage you wanted to?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the other thing too is the thing that I found interesting about that is there's sort of there's some town garage there that looks like it was turned over to the town at some point from the railroad, because the warehouse itself is not exactly contingent with where the lot lines are. But that could be something that, to the right developer, the town could help sort of, sweeten the pot to some degree and say, well, we want you to fix up this historic building, but then maybe also you could put in a couple of units or something on this side of the street to help to help offset the costs of the construction and help make it more attractive to a developer, if you sort of combine those two things, again, if that's the direction the town wants to go.
It seems like just heading farther west on 346, that's really where the village kind of begins. That's where the homes start to, the residential development really picks up.
It would really be a gateway into, North Pownell from that direction, the same way that, going past the post office and the motorcycle shop now, I suppose, is a gateway in the other direction.
So we wanted to give a little bit of, and that's why, as Scott sort of mentioned, that variable figure kind of is there. And not to gloss over this, from the previous, the Pownell Center infill, the former, was it Warren Meyer that had been right there in time past, just right at that.
They originally, Warren Wire was the original plant for Mac Mobile.
Back.
That was Mac, yeah.
And they used that as a storage facility. With chemicals, Jim? Teflon.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that also, the variable there is, as we listed, is because I think we've seen that there may be some role for the town wishes to play in that site's future. It may be that there's a lot of creativity may be relevant there, but it's where there's brownfield issues, that the numbers can go where they go.
They can exponentially increase very rapidly as.
I'm hoping that maybe the firehouse will get that property. They want to build a new firehouse.
The firehouse here.
Yeah, yeah. They're actively campaigning, getting some money, doing some things.
On the.
Well, I think we're looking at this property over here on the other side. That's basically wetlands.
The one we ended up, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which gives a lot of the energy to what the subsequent story would be at the current firehouse, should that take place. But there's a great opportunity for municipalities to get in the game, or districts to get in the game, and to see what the results of that should be.
And that's also a great opportunity. I'm just thinking because the turn onto North Pownell Road is not very visible from, Route 7. So to really invite people into this community and into this whole aspect where the town is already investing in this area, it would be nice to have some kind of a landmark piece of architecture where the firehouse currently is, or at least some kind of, clearing to make it feel a little more open and welcoming. Yeah.
Good, yeah.
North Pownell looks like, this back road looks like it's development, and it's, it's, keep on out. There's a place next to you,
Peckham?
yeah, Peckham's. It's,
What's happening there?
I don't know. Somebody's paying the taxes on it. There's a young boy that's left in the family, that place you're always talking about. And,
You know that Peckham Farm that's for sale?
yeah,
Yes, I received something. Somebody from Michigan is looking to subdivide it.
Well, it's beautiful property. Hate to see it.
so many people looking, there's so many people looking at Pownell from different places. It's scary. It's scary. To think that Peckham sold and, it's, what's going on in Northwest Hill, development, big money.
Palo Alto.
It's, we're just too close. We have the nicest town next to us, Williamstown. Everybody's interested in Williamstown, and the circle
People are
is,
getting interested in Pownell because the taxes are lower here, and there's many beautiful
Land over
pieces of
there.
property to be bought.
I know, but,
To wit Peckham's, what a gorgeous, gorgeous place.
yeah, but it's not gonna be a farm, you.
No, it's not gonna be a farm anymore.
Somebody's already bought
Really?
3 acres of it, just to set on it. And, she said nothing's gonna happen there.
It's kind of like what happened in Sunderland. Along Sunderland Road, the slope, the meadows, they were farm meadows. It's like all houses now.
Yeah.
A lot of land in Pownell, a lot of land.
So we talk about this firehouse, but there's another firehouse on our list here. And not because we want to tear it down, but because it has a large amount of space that is attached to the lot where the post office and the firehouse are, near 346 and 7, where they come together, and also a nice 5-acre lot across the street from that we feel might be a good spot for some level of commercial development. Again, whether that's, retail pharmacy sort of level scale, whether that's laundromat scale, the community needs and the market would bear for that. But we think that that's, between being at the intersection of two major roads, we feel that that's a really appropriate spot for this kind of development.
The 5-acre parcel is a larger 17.5, or it's a bigger component between Winchester's and Pownell Pets, and but the 5 acres of it is sort of developable. After that, the slope just kind of gets, a little bit high. Yeah, it gets high. So we thought that there's like a good acre sort of sub-component, 5-acre area that's right on the road where that would make some sense. And as Scott says, with 8.2 acres between the post office and the fire department, perhaps there's space there for another 1 or 2 buildings and businesses that would go into those buildings. And, as you're entering into that part of town, there's the ongoing old dairy bar structures and on your right. And then, so it seems like an appropriate place for additional commercial activity, particularly given what's on the other side of Route 7 right there.
Well, fixing up the roads showed a lot of people that amount of traffic going through Pownell.
Yeah.
There's huge amounts of traffic.
Going straight through.
They're out
Wrong with that?
as they go.
That's why I suggested a Costco here. I'm telling you,
So
it's in between a lot of large areas.
A lot of areas. The hospital's a major employer. I mean, fantastic.
I don't,
Lucky.
Every retail chain has their own specific things that they want for, what their citing criteria are. I wrote a paper on Costco's citing criteria in grad school, actually.
oh, interesting. Tell us what it is.
But I do not believe we are close enough to an interstate for them, and Costco also has a very high, they want a education level factor for the general public, which I'm not sure that would qualify for here. They're also just not in their chain. Anyway, there's a whole thing. But there are, but some places like a McDonald's or something are going to be like, we just want the raw numbers of the amount of cars that are driving by in front of us. So every individual chain store is going to have their own different sets of criteria. And if there are specific things that,
But I think if you did get a larger retail store, you're gonna get smaller stores also
Right.
wanting to come in.
an anchor store with it. Yeah, that's more of the commercial type of development that we're looking at here. And we actually didn't identify that junction as being particularly good. If you look for residential, commercial, mixed use or industrial, we really feel that that's strongest really as a commercial development. And we don't think that would necessarily be the right place for other types of residential or other
Well,
development.
you were talking more like on Route 7 anyway, weren't you?
Yes.
Up by the number 1.
Big field.
One of the departures we made from
Seven
tying
Fast
commercial
Road, yeah.
to sewer was at the Hart Gravel Bank. That's got an interesting story of its acquisition now, and but something that, given, it's outside of that sewer area, so you might not have a large number of employees, but it would be the sort of place that I think can hold 2 to 6 workforce that size, or something has a much smaller implement footprint. But I think, Michelle, we had heard you mention a need for storage and other sorts of like climate controlled, access storage. And so entities like that may find that the on off right there at the gravel bank is actually ideal. Obviously that portion close to 7 is very buildable. There's a large envelope there. It gets a little more steep as you go back, but that was of that large site, a not insignificant portion would be a feasible place to construct it. Just as you see with SVMC's campus, sort of just, you don't need a lot of room, just enough to get cars in and out and a structure with the adequate sort of service around it. That sort of rounded out the fifth of the commercial sites, but there was one there that we thought, just wanted to highlight, particularly given its an ease of access for customers bringing in dollars from Massachusetts. Be happy to talk a little bit about the residential, or if you'd like to talk more about the commercial, we can continue to discuss.
I think you've got it outlined fairly good.
Yeah.
Been here a long time and, you've hit the spots.
Oh, it's time to go.
So there's a few sites here now as we look at residential.
Just skim through it real fast.
Real fast. So, North Pownell Center, and then the most interesting one, we'll get to that, is at Northwest Hill Road. And I think, that one is, I'd love to hear your thoughts on. I think it shouldn't surprise anybody that a couple of areas along 346 in North Pownell make some sense from a residential development perspective. I just think Mount Anthony Tree Farm, for example, right across the street from closer across the street from where the youth baseball team plays that field. That's and as we were going through this sort of housing, especially along the southern portion of Wildlands Run Farm and the northern portion of the farm across the street, we were thinking about housing, and especially at Pettit Drive as well, housing that was sort of designed with seniors in mind, as an area that there is simply not enough of anywhere, and certainly not in Vermont or southwestern Vermont. And part of the value there is that is not multi-story housing. Those are not structures that get in the way of, I think, the families that love to use that baseball stadium, that baseball fields, and see what's across the valley from them. And all the research that you can imagine shows without any doubt just how valuable it is for seniors to be able to spend time watching kids have fun. And
That's a nice point.
It's just so there's some value in thinking of how those two communities benefit one another. And so that sort of came to mind as a viable place. That sort of approach that makes some sense.
We also think, and either in that site, because that's has a decent amount of acreage, or, and this is not the exact same site, because we're not, what we were talking about when it came to the first industrial and commercial developments, when we talked about that Route 7 access near what we're talking about, Pettit Drive, so the lot behind it, but behind sort of those three development sites, might also be a nice spot for some kind of a senior center or retirement community type of housing area. Largely again due to the fact that now that you have the nice SVMC Pownell campus here, and also still very close access to the hospital, it feels like a nice natural fit, as opposed to building all that stuff up in Manchester, where it's still a half an hour away from the hospital in each direction. It just seems like it would be a more sensible place to locate it here in Pownell.
As we looked at the theme of youth, we looked around the elementary school. There on Schoolhouse Road is a 6-acre parcel that's largely undeveloped. And that's along a residential corridor. While this might be a more traditional single-family home, detached dwellings, it's always nice to sort of be nearby a school. It's nice and quiet on the weekends, and it's full of laughing children during the work week. So there's some undeveloped frontage there, not the entire 6 acres of that parcel, but certainly enough for a number of small homes, or a few homes would make some sense.
You could squeeze 3 to 5 houses in there fairly easily without there being much of an impact on the surrounding community.
And you've seen the Pownell Center infill before. One of the elements we're still sort of chasing down complete clarity on relates to the passage of the Home Act as of July 1st. There is adequate public municipal drinking water and sewer capacity. The density of homes on a block can go up to 5 units per acre. And that's a statewide new law. I haven't really seen how this is, if anyone's really jumped into this yet, but that's something that you can imagine, that in a lot of downtown areas where there's some settlement village center areas, that can raise the number of potential residences significantly in a fairly compact area. In keeping with the state's long stated goals of compact, village development separated by rural regions. That's something that, particularly in Pownell Center, there's a lot of potential from that perspective. Not everybody there is on, I think a lot of people, the well water is very easy to get in Pownell Center, so there's not a lot of drinking water system hookups. But that is, but be that as it may, it seems like Pownell Center still has a good bit of infill available to it based on our calculations. And that leads us finally to the Northwest Hill Road parcels. This was one that I think maybe we hadn't expected right at the outset. And then during our conversation with Joel and our ride around, we had noticed that the sewer system goes all the way out to Valley View, and that there in Valley View, there's maybe 18 or 20 residences. And
Very nice.
they're owned by people that they're year-round residents, and as a neighborhood. And that's really right next to that, belonging to Mr. Pollard's. There's about 30 acres, and then adjacent to it, still within the sewer district. There's a total of maybe about 40 between one outside of 4 acres and then one structure with a single home on it, where a number of single family freestanding detached homes could be built. And at the time that we took our drive around, that area was getting paved. So on Valley View, and it was an interesting thing to see. It's like, oh, this is for individuals or for young families or other families that wanted that kind of the neighbors across the street sort of experience. Can watch the kids while I go do this, that, or the other. There's some potential there as well. This would be sort of
The most beautiful sunsets.
and pretty phenomenal sunsets. So those were the 5 areas that sort of jumped out to us as having some strong potential. Some of it, new builds, all of it, but some of it in existing, among existing built sites, some in village centers, and then some sort of on the outskirts. The one sort of question I think that Scott had thought through was that what is the capacity for residential development along Montgomery Road when you're sort of dependent on that Main Street bridge? Are there emergency services, capacity things to be worked out? There's
Would you have to build a fire substation across the river in order to accommodate an additional 40 homes on that side of the river? Those types of questions need to be figured out as well.
Yeah.
so
Did you all look at the other property that's up for sale now on North Pownell Road? It's Churches,
a little farther down the hill, closer to.
beautiful little farm.
They're all beautiful, and so we that one was was a little.
It's not on the,
side of the village center. We sort of hadn't contemplated that, but I'm not certain if it's under any conservation easement. It may not be, but just like we hadn't contemplated that.
I noticed that there's several new houses going up along North Pownell Road, so.
Yeah, someone bit the bullet and is building that new structure on that former
On the turn,
outcropping by the turn.
it's in Williamstown, yeah.
Right. So hopefully this wasn't a too exhaustive review of 15 or more sites, but
It's interesting, thank you.
Yeah,
our timetable for this report, I think, was within the next week or so, that we can have this compiled into a document we can show the select board, knowing that we're back on our October timetable, essentially.
I just wanted to notice in the legend, railroad access listed
Railroad access not.
on any of the.
I see.
Okay, so you'd like us to add railroad to the map?
Oh, sure. Commercial.
We have such a, it's like the railroad just goes straight through and they don't,
Well, yeah.
we have such a bad, relations with them somehow.
General Cable must, I think they did have a loading dock there at one point.
At Mac?
A lot of factories in Bennington have loading docks.
Yeah.
We can
yeah,
make
I
sure to
remember.
note that everywhere in the, and when we do our parcel
Yeah,
review,
interesting.
whether or not there's road access. Yeah, if there's any other questions, please just forward them to Hannah and she'll send them to us and we'll make sure to include them in the report. So our timetable then is we're gonna write up this into a little bit more formal of a report. It'll have, clearer images of all of the parcels. And we will then present that to the select board as the next step, correct?
It would be good to have it on a map, I think.
Yes, and we will.
And on that map, a legend about sewer hookups, all those pertinent facts that have to do with development.
Yeah, we'll be sure to include all those relevant elements with and then the document is submitted to you, and also submitted to the select board for their review. If they have questions, they can bring us in and, we can give our accounting for what we've done and what we're going to complete before the project's end. But anyways, we wanted to get in front of you tonight to be able to share this and then to see if anything seemed wildly off or if it seemed like let's continue to learn more, or, we want to be sure that we have that feedback from you all.
Thank you.
What's the time frame on that? The rest of the paperwork you're talking about?
So we should have
Is that for October one?
You're complete. I think we're hoping there's an October 20-something select board meeting. We'd like to have it's done, where.
That'll be hopefully our final presentation will be at that October 21st or whatever is select board meeting.
Yeah. And so we have another 1 or 2 meetings with the planning commission before then as checkpoints. Okay, this is done. Is this finished? We have the full site descriptions. Where are the digestive resources that might be available looking like? And so having those pieces.
We present the full report to you guys first and then to the select board afterwards.
Okay, so what is the role of the planning commission in this? I mean, what is our input to the select board supposed to look like?
Your input is to us, so you can say, hey, you know what, we don't like the idea
Oh, okay. I
of the
got you.
Lovett Cemetery extension. We think that that's too much of a wish. You're not gonna get that
I love
unless.
it. I think it's a
You know,
riot.
unless you have a great big company coming in that wants to do something, whatever, that's also gonna want tax subsidies we can't afford. Like, your role is to tell us that right now, so that doesn't make it into the report.
Let's hook up the Mac building to sewer before we build a bridge.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
First order.
Sounds-
And to help us contextualize and prioritize how our recommendations go.
Yeah, like if we want them to prioritize only low impact to the town, the low cost options first.
So
That's
we're not-
The wish list stuff at the bottom.
so we're not building the
That's-
airport first?
No.
No airport.
I don't.
Helipad, maybe.
So that
A lot of
was,
people remember the way they tried to put a biomass plants down at the racetrack
that's what they had asked of us, Brian?
by the woodwork
That's what
No.
the select board had asked of us
to
initially,
make electricity.
that we should go for the lowest.
And it wasn't even town people.
Yeah.
It wasn't town people here, it was everybody else.
Look at
But yeah, we were
what we
against
could do
it.
for development in
There was a
town.
lot of Bennington people.
Where are some suitable
Town people.
locations that we could put in industrial or commercial development? Or,
I mean, there wasn't.
They were gonna grab $5 million on the deal. That was the deal.
what was feasible, so that way we weren't wasting town resources.
No, no,
looking at
no, of course.
Feasible options.
And so now that we have the sites list down, we're gonna put our sites list into a general report we'll give to you the next
You
week
know,
or
I would
two.
just-
And then the next conversation is gonna be us saying, now that we have our sites list, these are the types of,
They come out of the woodwork.
the types of legislation you could pass or the way you could rezone, or the way, in order to encourage this type of development in these areas.
I like that you included residential siting potential because that so much depends on residential availability.
Yeah.
If you're going to ask to put more industry in, you must have nice housing for young families and so on, so it all ties together.
Like, my personal opinion, I think most of Pownell is open to residential. I mean, there's.
Sure.
It is, yeah, it's just.
I know personally,
I mean,
I want to see more commercial and perhaps even more light, some light industrial. Gives me some hope that Dion Snowshoes has moved into Pownell. Like you were saying, like that's a perfect fit. like it's low impact. You know, it's not, it doesn't put a strain on, you know, it doesn't overtax Route 7. The town or the state doesn't have to do massive improvements to the roadway. They're not having to put a third turning lane in, you know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Arnold Pets is the best little thing we've put in town. The last thing we really put in town was Arnold Pets.
Yep.
And I thought there'd be some outcry from the motel, but nothing, so.
Cool, sounds good.
Okay, all right, thank you guys.
Thank you guys again.
Thank you for the presentation and good seeing you guys.
Well. Have a good
You
one.
guys have a great one.
Drive carefully.
So our next agenda item, I think, is, I think it's a misunderstanding. What I was asking for was placing Pledge of Allegiance at the top of our agenda as it is on the select board. For those who wish to say the pledge before we begin.
I just didn't know if we could put it on Slack and we decided to hold off. I didn't know.
We didn't vote on anything.
No.
It was just a discussion. We discussed it and, you know, we were divided almost equally or whatever, so, in consideration for people who don't wish to, they have that right. Those who wish to have that right as well, so, I would like to include that at the beginning of the agenda, and whoever wants to can, and whoever doesn't want to, doesn't need to feel any kind of pressure. And
well, yeah, but that's easy for you to say, they don't need to feel pressure, but
I'm not-
camera on people.
discussion, I didn't ask for a discussion. We
So
had.
your discussion is on the agenda and we approved the agenda, so that opens it up for
Okay, so
discussion.
we'll have a discussion again.
I'm just saying, like, the time to change that agenda item was at the beginning.
I know where we stand, and there's really not much, who's gonna change their mind from where we left off.
Well, I'm not opposed to it, but I think, you know, where the discussion left off last time, it's kind of inappropriate to unilaterally make the decision, Fred, to
Okay.
just say, I want to put it at the top of the agenda, we're going to do
Okay.
it. Like, if,
So we're-
I'm not opposed to it, I'm just saying,
It has to be a vote on it.
Let's take a vote.
Right,
We'll take a-
Also, you know,
we're gonna vote on a right. Is that what you're saying?
what?
Are we gonna vote on a right?
a vote.
I think you're confusing issues. So what you're talking about is adding a formal step to an ongoing meeting. You know, to meetings going forward. You want to add the pledge of allegiance
Yep.
to the steps that we take during a planning commission meeting, correct? Okay, so what I'm saying is
I wanna add-
you as chair can't unilaterally just add that. You can't do that. It would have to be a vote.
Okay.
That's all I'm saying.
Okay,
So being that we have the agenda item, that we can have a discussion, it's continued from previous
Okay.
discussion. Put it up for a vote,
okay.
let the vote fall where it may. If it gets voted down, then
We're voting for the option.
so if you're putting it to where it is part of the meeting, we do board member roll call, pledge of allegiance, all that good stuff, just like the select board does.
Okay,
We voted on that as a select board.
okay.
So I'm just saying, if you're gonna do that as part of the planning commission, you have to take a vote. That's all I'm saying.
All right,
Also, can I say something also? Knowing the overall climate of the country and the overall climate we've seen in Pownell, if something like that is televised and somebody decides that they do not feel like saying the Pledge of Allegiance for whatever the reason, that's like putting a target on somebody's back. I'm sorry. If you want to do the Pledge of Allegiance, it needs to be done before the video starts.
okay.
I think bringing up, if I may, bringing up the climate in the country is helpful, Michelle, because I feel that this is a controversial, as you said, it's a controversial question. The planning commission is divided fairly evenly on this. I haven't taken a count yet. And I think we want to work towards unity, don't we? Don't we want to work towards just unity as a board and as a commission, instead of getting people all riled up about a,
Yes, I get it.
my pledge, I'm here. I go to every election because I'm a justice of the peace.
I know.
I do my civic duty, I vote every little vote. That's my pledge. That's my action pledge. I don't need to prove it to the world.
Is it
Okay.
the Pledge of Allegiance for children? To teach them about civics in school,
That's,
one country, indivisible, undivided, liberty and justice for all.
well, we are
It
different.
doesn't strike me as something that adults do. I think you teach civics in school, we know, we've been through that, we know what that is. What's the point?
Right,
That's
and,
my opinion. I'm sorry.
yeah, and also, why get people riled up over it?
Why should?
What's,
How are we gonna rile up people?
My question is,
why is it necessary?
why?
Why do we need it?
Personally, I don't
I
even
agree with
care.
Michelle, that if we're gonna do it, we do it before the cameras roll.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Absolutely right.
Fred said if no one wants to participate, that's their business, but it shouldn't be on camera. I think that's the right.
That's-
So if you want
Very good
to
compromise.
informal, something informal before the meeting officially starts, that's totally different. That's just a group of citizens. That has nothing to do with anything official that we
right.
should be discussing at this
That's
time.
how it ought to be.
That's simple as that.
Very good
Do it
compromise.
in the parking lot, I mean.
Yeah,
You wanna say it, say it. If you don't want it, but leave it off the camera.
that's right.
And involve people's opinions, whatever.
I thought about, at one point, when I thought about it, I did go down that road. Do it off camera, pause the recording,
Yeah,
whatever, and then do it.
yeah.
So if you-
I could go with that.
Yeah, so you can't stop the recording of the meeting, the broadcast of it, to do it.
Okay,
Because
so
then you were still officially under the meeting.
Before the meeting.
You would have to do it before the meeting as a group of informal citizens, not as part of the meeting.
Town
That's the only way you could do it.
Yeah, I don't see what it has to do with our duty as our town duties.
Have to do anything.
It's
It
nothing
doesn't have
to do
nothing to
with-
do with the meeting, it has just to do with the
Then why are we
feeling
doing it?
of,
Why are we even discussing it?
why do I not have to do it? That's the
Selectmen did
point.
it.
If you're saying you don't want to do it, if I want to, now you're telling me I can't do it.
But
If I just wanted to stand up and say the
at
pledge,
home, I mean, you can,
you're saying I can't do it.
you can, it's just not appropriate for a planning commission. We're just a commit,
Where's my right to be able to say it if I want to? I feel that way about it. I believe in my country that way, and that's the way I feel.
but none of us are saying we don't believe in it.
So.
We all have different backgrounds. He's a military man, I'm a military man.
Right.
We're used to saying
To
things.
John's point, John was saying it's his right. Well, we have public comment. You want to stand up, use your 3 minutes to do the pledge during public comment? There's nothing stopping you.
But what about just before the meeting? I mean, if somebody.
That's simpler.
That's different. That's before the meeting starts. No, I'm just saying that if John's saying it's his right, if he wants to do it during the meeting, then if he wants to stand up as a private citizen and say, I would like to use my public comment to say the Pledge of Allegiance.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
That's what I'm saying to that point. To Fred's point, if you want to do it before a meeting as just a citizen, you want to come in, you want to stand at the,
Look out
say the
the
flag, there's no, you
Stand in hard.
have the right to do that. Anybody can do that.
But I know
I'm
what-
saying you can't force it to be part of the meeting.
Yeah, that's fine.
Unilaterally, unless we take a vote.
I agree. I mean, given what goes on with social media now, to be singled out because you're not or are doing it seems to be silly. It's inviting trouble.
Right.
So,
Well, yeah, that's why I wondered why it ever even came up. I mean, if we're working towards civility and unity,
It originally came up because I noticed the select board was doing it, and I said, that looks like not bad. Don't look like a bad thing, it's not a bad thing.
And the select board voted as a group
Right, and it's
to
not
do
a bad
it.
thing.
So
So-
if I say,
That's why it came up.
yeah, so if you want to take the vote, I say, take the vote. If you want to let it drop and just do it as something informal before the meeting, then the planning commission cannot oppose or support that. So I'm just saying
Okay,
that,
so it won't have to go on the agenda.
Don't have to go on.
well, I mean, you could, that's entirely up to you as far as if you want to put a motion forward or.
I'll make a motion for it.
What's the motion?
Motion to say the pledge before or during like the select board does, as a part of our meeting.
I think you have to vote on it now.
Now you need a second.
Somebody has to second the motion.
Yeah, just second, somebody.
Can the chair second him?
Chair can second, chair can make motions too.
Sure.
I'll second it because I have no issue with it.
I don't personally care. I don't think it's important. But I do think there's an importance to it. As you say, we started out in school
Yeah.
back when we were kids, and it was important. And we learned the value of it. And a lot of us went into service. A lot of us went and did things. We did things. And
We're still doing things, Jimmy, you're still here.
I know.
Yeah,
And
we learned.
and
We
it was-
learned in elementary school, we don't need the
dictated to
reminders.
us. It was dictated to us as children. We didn't have a choice. We're adults, we have a choice. It was indoctrinated into us as children to say the Pledge of Allegiance. What about, and God wasn't in the Pledge of Allegiance, before
Here we go.
1961. So
But I don't think we should be getting into this. I think you guys should just take a vote. You guys know how you stand on it. I don't think we should be making each other feel bad.
All right, wait.
So just take the vote, get it over with. So you have a motion and a second on the floor.
vote and then we don't stand up, then we've got people calling us anti-American and all sorts of other stuff.
Don't get into
So
it.
what?
Not great.
Who wants to start with it?
I'll take a vote.
You want it? Or we know where you stand. You're against, right?
So,
So you have a motion and a second, Chair.
Don't vote for me. I'll vote for myself, thank you.
No. I'm just saying, someone's got to start it. We got a motion and we got a second.
Just send it around the table.
And
so all in favor
so you gotta go round table.
Round table.
Have broadcast.
of the motion?
I'll start. John, aye.
I just don't care.
Can you abstain?
You can abstain.
I want to say yes and I don't want to say no. So that's where I stand. I think this is childish in a lot of ways. And we're on television and they are understanding what we're doing and
We have public comment on this?
it doesn't make any sense.
Somebody that.
Sorry.
I agree. If you want to do it before the meeting,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that's your freedom, that's your choice, but I
So
mean,
you voting?
television, I don't want to tell.
He doesn't want to vote.
So that's,
That's before the meeting. If you want to do it before the meeting, and I agree with him.
and I'm fine with that. That's my recommendation
Yeah.
for it.
I mean,
Was that what the motion was, John?
No, that's not what the motion was.
Put it in for part of the meeting.
Yeah, John's motion was to make it part of the official meeting. So it looks like two abstains, but they haven't said
Can
outright.
vote.
No, for the reasons I stated. I think that John has a perfect right to do it.
of course he does. And I agree with it, totally.
Yeah, looks like everybody's here, so Roy.
That's all we're asking,
Roy
just
can't
vote
vote.
around table.
We have-
Right,
Who's out?
I voted no.
He can vote. His vote doesn't count against. He can count even if nobody's out.
I said that again, I'm sorry.
You can vote.
Okay, good.
I thought he could only vote.
you're
if-
voting no.
One.
No, but your choice, we also he can still vote either way. When he's here, he still can vote. But then
Okay.
if he's not here, it doesn't count against your quorum.
Oh, okay,
Okay,
Got it.
so I will abstain.
okay. That's fair.
Roy votes no. Michelle?
No.
No.
No,
I'm gonna choose to abstain.
no.
So motion passed. Okay, there, that's settled.
Let's go home, drink wine.
Okay, no,
We had our conversations, we all had our feelings and, hey,
Take a motion to adjourn.
motion to adjourn?
Or no, we got public comment.
We got public comment, haven't we?
Anybody in public?
No, nobody's on.
Nobody's here.
Nobody's on.
Thank God nobody's listening.
Motion to adjourn.
So, John.
Motion to adjourn then.
Second,
Second, okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Brian, I.
Aye.
You give me your email. Tell me.
Conversation.
Why have you?
We're voting to adjourn. So you got to give your vote.
Aye.
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 Aye.